What is going on, guys? This is Mia. So ever since we got Legacy of Destruction both in the OCG and TCG, I started noticing a lot of people playing Ghost Ogre in their main deck or side deck, and a lot of people kind of brainwashing the community by telling them that Ghost Ogre is insane and you gotta play it and it is one of the best hand traps of the format, etc, blah blah blah. And I'm here to tell you today that you've probably been lied to and Ghost Ogre might be a little less good than you think. But of course, I will be giving a nuanced, explanation and discussion over this card. It's not just gonna be oh, a card is bad, don't play it, period. So yeah, I'll be going over the reasons to play Ghost Ogre and to not play Ghost Ogre, pretty much when the card is good and when the card is not good, so try to identify in any given format whether or not Ghost Ogre is a potential option. Again, either in the main deck or side deck, because there is a big difference. If it's in your side, then you're only really bringing it in when it's going to be good against a certain matchup. But anyways, before we go any further in this video, I would really appreciate you guys if you could smash the like and subscribe button. It really motivates me a lot to keep existing. And also, huge shout outs to my sponsors, Inspire TCG, Dueling Guard, and Card Brawlers. Go check all them out. Again, all the links will be in the description box below. And with that being said, let's get right into it. Alright, so first things first, if you're, let's say, main decking Ghost Ogre, because again, this is a little more relevant to the subject of discussion. So if you're main decking Ghost Ogre, you gotta ask yourself the following question. Is Ogre better than any of the following hand traps? So is it better than Ash? Is it better than Imperm? Is it better than Veiler? Is it better than Mourner? Is it better than Nib? And is it better than Droll? Because you're probably always going to be playing, sorry, I'm saying probably, I really meant always. You're always going to be playing the best hand traps first. And the best hand traps in Yu-Gi-Oh! At the current moment are, objectively speaking, Ash number 1, Imperm number 2. By the way, all this is excluding Shifter because only a few decks can play Shifter. But anyways, Ash number 1, Imperm number 2, Veiler number 3, Mourner number 4, Nibiru number 5, and Droll number 6. There are some decks where you're not really following, this exact sequence, because certain decks like Kashtira, for example, they can't play Nib, because then if you Nib your opponent, you control a monster on the field, and then you cannot summon a Kashtira monster. Same thing with Melodious, for example. If you control a monster on the field, then you can't use First Movement Solo or Ostinato. You gotta control no monsters for you to be able to use any of them. So that's a different story for them. Sometimes Ghost Ogre can make sense to play over cards like Nibiru, and sometimes Droll and Logbird might be bad in your environment. But cards like Ash, Imper, and Veiler, those cards are super generic. So you're probably playing those 9 hand traps before you're playing a single copy of Ogre. So in other words, you're pretty much only really playing Ogre when you're already playing a lot of cards, well, a lot of hand traps in your deck. Ogre is only really good in hand traps turbo decks that can run anywhere between 12 to 15 to sometimes maybe 18 hand traps. I think the only deck that can really afford the luxury of playing 18 hand traps would be either Pure Snake Eyes or Tenpai Dragon. And even then, if you're playing Pure Snake Eyes with 18 hand traps, you're probably playing like 42 cards or 43 cards in your main deck. At least if you want to fit in Cross-Out Designator. Otherwise, yeah, sure, you can play 18, but then your deck plays a lot of hand traps, but you also lose to hand traps quite more. Tenpai Dragon, they can really afford that. So again, are you playing Ogre over a good hand trap or over a bad hand trap, at least in your deck? You gotta ask yourself that question, because I can't do it for you, but I will be trying my best to go over all those decks and try to figure out if it's good in and against those decks. Alright, so first things first, is Ogre really good against Tenpai Dragon? Because people keep saying, yeah bro, it's insane against them, you Ogre the field spell and then they lose. It's not that simple, because yeah, sure, you can Ogre their effect to search, which is insane, it's not like Union Hanger and Trickstar Light Stage where it gets the search on activation. Sangan Summoning, you gotta activate the card first, and then when the card already resolved, then you activate its Ignition effect to search a Tenpai Dragon monster from your deck to your hand, and then you discard 1 card. So if you Ogre that, they don't discard, because obviously it's not a cost, but they also don't search a Tenpai Dragon, and most importantly, they lose their immunity to all of your activated effects during main phase 1. But the issue is, it's only really true when their only way to play is Sangan Summoning, or when they completely disregard the Ghost Ogre completely. If they have a really good hand, they can always beat Ghost Ogre. I'm telling you this right now. If they have something like Sangan Summoning and white or red, it doesn't matter. You go activate Sangan Summoning effect, you Ogre, and then they still OTK you with 1 single card, because they can just go, okay, activate, search the Kaiban, and then battle phase, activate, and then summon Fedora or Chunjua, battle, summon the other one, and then you're completely dead. But the issue is, nothing forces them to go into Sangan Summoning to kill you, because this is just one of the several ways Tenpai Dragon can kill you. They can just, go straight normal Pydra, surge the Kaiman instead, and then they do lose to Ash a little more. But to be fair, even if they surge the field spell with that, and then they go effect, surge the Chunjua, you could also Ash the field spell, and it ends up being the same. So Ogre is not really any better than a card like Ash. And unless your opponent straight up just straight up starts with Sangan Summoning, Valor can also take care of their, I don't know, normal summon Chunjua or normal summon Paijua. Again, considering the fact that they don't have summoning or Kaimen, because then I guess it's less true. But Ogre is only really good against one specific card. It's not like it's good against the entire deck. So saying that Ogre is good against Tenpai Dragon is kind of a lie or misrepresentative to a certain extent, because again, it's not really good against the entire deck. It's only good against one card. I do understand that, you know, out of the 18 cards in the engine, 4 of them are Sangan Summonings, pretty much, because you're playing 3 of Field Spell and 1 Terraforming. So it is good against, like, roughly 20-ish something% of the portion of the deck, but against the other 70-something% that isn't Fajra or the Field Spell, they have infinite ways of killing you without losing to Ogre, so it's just not good enough. But again, at least it does something against them, so I will still give Ogre a solid 8 out of 10 against Tenpai Dragon. It's not too bad. And also in the deck, it's pretty playable, because again, you might be able to play Nibiru. I don't think there's too much conflicting, at least that I can think of. But yeah, you can play so many hand traps that it doesn't really matter. You just play like all the good ones before, and then you play Ogre, so that's completely fine. Now, against pure Snake Eyes or anything Snake Eyes, Ogre is just bad. Let's just stop lying. Let's just stop the copium and everything. I understand that you can Ogre Appaloosa and IP Masquerena, but that's just not a really convenient, that's just not enough. Because if they go straight up normal summon Snake Eye Ash effect, you can't really Ogre that. It's just not good enough. Because then they search Populace and then they summon, and then they still get their search for original. And then they pretty much still end on the exact same board minus Appaloosa, so it's gonna be a rank 4, and then a Flamberge, IP, and the Spell and Trap Zone. I know the combo by heart because it's the exact same thing every single time. And so yeah, you don't want to Ogre that. If your opponent starts like Diabell Star effect, you Ogre, and then they can normal summon any monster, and then they still combo, so it also doesn't matter at all. Not really that fantastic. Yeah, I'm just very skeptical about Ogre against that deck, and I guess you can say, oh yeah, but if you got Ogre and Nibiru, you nib them, and then you Ogre the Divine Temple. Bro, like, at this point, you can argue that if you have Ogre in combination with any hand trap, then any other of those hand traps in combination with any other hand trap would do the same thing. So again, this is only really true when you can play so many hand traps that they all end up being the same. But again, Ogre being a once per turn makes it infinitely less good to draw as duplicate than cards like Imperm and Valor. So yeah, against pure Snake Eyes, not super great. And also in the deck, it's catastrophic because you don't need it as a cross-out target. You only really need, Nib, Droll sometimes, Mourner, Valor, Imperm, all those cards, really. That's still 18 hand traps. You're not trying to play all those 7 hand traps. That's completely overkill. Then you start breaking. Against Far King, Ogre is just complete trash. Like, that's it. There's no way to sugarcoat it. Ogre is ass. I've been Ogred several times at YCS Rio, and that was like literally the worst hand trap every single time it resolved against me. It was 1 for 0.5. It's hard to explain, but my extender wasn't getting stopped. It's just that instead of getting like multiple bodies, it would get like 1 less body. Instead of getting like 5 monsters with like 2 cards or something, I might be exaggerating a bit, I would be getting like 4 monsters. Whereas if I got Valored, then it stops everything. Ogre, still just so bad. What are you gonna do? Ogre the Far King Island? That's a nice deck you got there. Far King Sanctuary can protect it. So when there's inherent ways of beating Ogre, it's just so bad against those decks. Again, it's just not bad, but you can only really justify Ogre when you're drawing it in tandem with any other hand trap. But again, same thing I've just mentioned 2 seconds ago. If you draw Nib with a hand trap, it's game. If you draw Ash with a hand trap, or Imperm with Imperm, or Valor with Valor, or even Droll with a hand trap, it's also game. And Ogre against Voice's Voice is not bad, but it's also not super great. It looks insane because if their only play is, normal summon Novox or normal summon Diviner and then get the barrier on the field and then activate that to try to search the Saphira and you Ogre that, then it's pretty good. But if they go straight, Saphira effect, search Skull Guardian, and then Ritual summon Skull Guardian, send anything, you can't Ogre the Skull Guardian because, then there's the Ritual spell on the field, so it can, in the grave, so it can banish itself, summon another Skull Guardian, and then they can still normal summon the Novox and then get their plays going from there. And if you hold your Ogre for too long, then their Skull Guardian is going to be alive because they're going to be searching Novox off of Skull Guardian, and then they can negate your one hand trap. So it looks insane, but I want to say at this point, you wouldn't even want to side deck Ogre against Voice's Voice. You would just side deck Board Breakers. Board Breakers are good against this deck. They don't make like a completely unbreakable board, so you should be relatively fine without Ogre whatsoever. And also in the deck, it's pretty bad. You'd rather play cards like Nibiru, with all those 4 hand traps, of course. Because Nibiru can be used as a ritual material, whereas Ogre, it's not even like you can say, oh, I can normal summon it and then make a Baron with a level 7 ritual. Not really. Alright, against Yubel, it's not bad. You can Ogre the Nightmare Pain, but it's gonna be way less relevant with the next wave of support. Well, I mean, Phantom of Yubel is gonna make all this completely irrelevant because now they can easily beat hand shops. They start with Nightmare Throne, destroy the Spirit of Yubel, and then summon Yubel, and then make Phantom of Yubel, and then you're screwed. Forget about Ogre against Yubel for, you know, starting when we get the fusion monster. At the moment, it's still not too bad. Ogre against Despia is catastrophic, but you can Ogre Fallen Valbast for pretty good value, and you can also Ogre Blazing Cartesia. Blazing Cartesia does fuse using any monsters from your hand or field, not necessarily just using itself and any and other monsters. So they can still fuse, but you're preventing them from summoning the Grand Guignol, which is what you really need because this card is the reason why they send the Gimmick Puppet Nightmare and then screw you over. So at least Ogring that card, which might happen every now and then, is not too bad. And then Ogre against Labyrinth is complete trash. That's kind of obvious. And Ogre against Melodious is so interesting because it's a Pendulum deck, so you would want to believe that Ogre is insane against them. And to be fair, there are a lot of, you know, good targets to hit with Ogre. You can Ogre the Couplet, which pretty much screws up their one-card combo. So it makes it so that Refrain is no longer a card that gets you everywhere because then they don't get to search the Concerto and everything. And this is also true for First Movement Solo. The one issue is that if they have any other extender, they can go into Bloom Harmonist and then play through your Ogre as if it did nothing. Another thing is, if they don't have Refrain, if they just have like 2 Melodious monsters on the field and then they link off into Bloom Harmonist and you Ogre that, it basically behaves like a Gamma. And that's what I really wanted to mention in this video. Ogre is the best hand trap in the format when it behaves consistently like a Gamma, when it pretty much negates and destroys, which is the reason why it's really good against the Tenpai Dragon Field spell, because it stops it from resolving and it also gets rid of it. So it does 2 things in one. So it's really good against monsters that have to be on the field to fully activate and resolve, like Natural Beast and stuff like that. I believe that's how it's worded. And Bloom Harmonist is pretty much like that because it has to summon to zone it points to. So if you Ogre it, then it just fizzles. It resolves with no effect. And that's exactly what you want. But if your opponent goes for Ostinato, it's kind of shit because, like, what are you going to do? Ogre the fusion monster that summons from the deck? Okay, sure, then they can summon back a monster from the grave. That's just garbage. You'd rather just not even Ogre at this point. So yeah, or at least hold it for like super long, and it doesn't do enough. You don't really use it early on. At least against Melodious most of the time because they can play through it. It's just not super high impact, but if their hand is like super weak, then Ogre does beat them. But again, to be fair, any hand trap here would beat them anyways if their hand is weak, so it ends up being the same. By the way, another thing that I mentioned, if you Ogre the Melodious deck on the Couplet, you're not necessarily shutting them complete access to rich fusion summoning because they still have Soprano that can fuse on the field. So even without Concerto access, they can still kind of play the game. Ogre against Purely, it's good and bad at the same time. If you Ogre My Friend and it resolves, then that's great for you because that's a great card to Ogre. It's fantastic. The issue is that a Happy Memory can make it indestructible by guard effect. That's not gonna happen too often because they do have to draw Happy Memory, and you know, My Friend does have to be searched preemptively, or sometimes they can hard draw both of those cards. The odds are low, so I think more often than not, Ogre is not too bad. So I think you should be fine. And you can also Ogre the level 1 kitty and do it through the field spell because you're not targeting, obviously. So that it's not bad. Ogre is at least somewhat of an option against Purely. It's not just a card that does nothing, like Nibiru, for example. Ogre against Runic was so close to being good. The only issue is that Yugen, which is the monster that they're always going into, protects Ogre. You know, it protects Fountain from Ogre. So if that wasn't the case, then Ogre would have been great, but unfortunately, it is what it is. Ogre against Centurion, it's not bad at all, and it's also good in the deck because you can play so many hand traps. If you can Ogre the Centurion Trudea, it's insane. It also doesn't place anything from the deck in the spell and trap zone, but they can use Shifter in order to prevent you from Ogreing or Veiloring them. So yeah, keep that in mind. Same thing with Kashira and Flunderies, by the way. Because again, Ghost Ogre on the Flunderies field spell is pretty insane if they don't have Robina access. If they just have, you know, field spell and Eaglin, I mean, just have. That's already the 2-card FTK. Then you lose, but again, the real combo, the real Flunderies typical starting hand is field spell, Eaglin, Shifter. So yeah, you know this is not gonna work. And finally, there is a Kashtira. They have a bunch of ways of beating Ogre. I think this card's really bad because they can go Special Summon Unicorn and then Search Birth and then activate the Birth and then not use its effective Monster Reborn. Obviously, they can't. Normal Summon the Fenrir, get a Search. There's nothing to Ogre yet. And then they can make Draco Sack, summon double tokens and then turn them into Link Spider. Go into G-Golem Crystal Heart and then you have to Ogre there. Ogre is nice against G-Golem because it's just like against Bloom Harmonist, it has to summon back to a zone it points to. So if you Ogre, it pretty much negates and destroys, which is really nice. So you do that, and then they cannot make an Appaloosa, but then they still resolve their Kashtira Birth. If you don't Ogre the G-Golem, then they make Appo, and your Ogre on Kashtira Birth will not resolve. So it's just not good enough. You'd rather like draw them even at this point, or nib them before they can like summon the Appaloosa. That would still be better because at least you summon a monster on your field, and that can jump over the Kashtira monster that he summoned back with the birth. But yeah, all of that to say that Ogre is just not as good as you think it is. If you think that the card is like the best hand trap of the format, or even close to that, I do believe that it is like the 6th, 7th best hand trap in the format at the moment. Again, it is still way worse than Ash Impermanent Veiler, and it is somewhat comparable to like Mourner Nib Droll, depending on the deck that is being played in and against. It really does depend, but the most popular deck by a long shot is still pure Snake Eye and Fire King Snake Eye, and Ogre is bad against both of them, so it's really hard to justify this card as being a viable solution in this format. It's just one solution among many other, but it's just not a really good one, which is the reason why all the pro players, they're just not main decking Ghost Ogre whatsoever, and a bunch of them are also not side decking Ogre. And again, it was the worst hand trap in my main deck at YCS Rio. I can promise you that on my life. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know your thoughts about Ghost Ogre in the comment section below. And I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.